Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So presumably, Jeremy, the first thing you want to do is congratulate the Prime Minister on initiating successful trade talks with America.
Well, we don't know if they were successful or not, and many of us are very worried that the deal she's offering is for US companies to get access to the British health service and take over part of our health service. Also, the fact that she seemed unable to raise the issue of his treatment of refugees, of his treatment of Muslims, of the building of the wall with Mexico, seems to me shocking. And it wasn't until midnight that she actually got round to readjusting a position she should have adopted from the very beginning.
Should she have gone? Should she have gone to meet him?
Yes, I think it's right to have a relationship with the USA, but you've got to be very open with them. They signed up to the 1951 Geneva Convention on Refugees. They signed up to the UN Convention on Torture. Trump is trying to tear both of those up in his approach both to refugees and his proposal to bring back waterboarding.
But he has every right, surely, to determine who comes into his country.
He has, of course, every country has that right, but when you've signed up to an international convention on torture, when you've signed up to the UN Convention on Refugees, the 1951 Convention, then that is something you've decided to do as a country, as we have. Therefore, you must hold up to it. And surely it's the duty of neighbours, other countries, to say, well, the accountability of a treaty is of all parties to that treaty.
Now, what would you like to see her doing in practical terms to help people like her own MP, Nadim Zahawi, who says that because he was born in Iraq, he now thinks he can't travel to America? So Mo Farah is dual nationality, holds a Somali passport, or is still a Somali national. It looks as though he won't be able to travel to America, where he trained for many years. But I think what should she be doing in practical terms for British citizens who are affected by this ban?
Well, British citizens affected by this ban should be, their cases, of course, should be raised, but it's not just about the individuals, it's about the generality of the whole thing. I'm sure Mo Farah would say the same. He doesn't want an exception for himself. He wants a principle that Muslims like himself are allowed to travel to and from the USA. The idea that you could list a series of countries and say, sorry, you can't come to the USA because you're a majority Muslim country. It's quite interesting that Donald Trump, in, 9 days in office, has managed to unite Uber, Google and New York taxi drivers. New York taxi drivers yesterday had a strike outside JFK Airport because they were so upset, and they said, no hate, no fear, Muslims welcome here.
Now, you've made it clear that you oppose Donald Trump both on his values and on many of his policies. Is it appropriate that the Queen has invited him over for a state visit?
It's slightly odd he should be invited so quickly, and particularly in view of the statements that he's made, and I suspect this visit is something that might find its way into the long grass.
I mean, would you, if you were Her Majesty, therefore, not rush to organise this?
Absolutely not rush at all, because I think we need to find out exactly what his intentions are in the long run, and how much the US parliamentary system is actually going to protect fundamentals of rights and freedoms and laws. And is it really right to endorse somebody who has used this awful misogynist language throughout the election campaign, awful attacks on Muslims, and then of course this absurd idea of building a wall between themselves and their nearest neighbour?
If he doesn't modify his ban on people coming from those 7 countries, do you think we should rescind the invitation? Do you think we should cancel the state visit?
I think we should make it very clear that we are...
Paddy Ashton, for example, this morning has said we should cancel it.
Extremely upset about it, and I think it would be totally wrong for him to be coming here while that situation is going on. I think he has to be challenged on this, because it's a...
So just to be clear, until that ban is lifted, you don't think he should come here?
I'm not happy about him coming here until that ban is lifted, quite honestly, because look at what's happening with those countries. How many more is it going to be? What's going to be the long-term effect of this on the rest of the world?
But that said, I mean, you're now on the on the record as saying that Brexit has got to happen in the absence of membership of the European Union. Plainly, our relationship with America matters more than ever. So you would take the view that we've got to have a constructive relationship, particularly on trade.
We have a constructive relationship with everybody. The majority of our trade is actually with the European Union. 3 times as much trade is with the European Union as with the USA. And in future, we will have to have an effective market trading arrangement with the European Union, and that is something I'm very keen to see. It's what we're saying in Parliament this week. It's why I've invited leaders of all the European Socialist parties to London next month, so that we have that direct relationship with them. Clearly, there has to be a relationship with the rest of the world. But what Trump is doing is not anything necessarily to do with the European Union. What he's doing is tearing up international agreements that have lasted, in the case of the Geneva Convention, more than 50 years.
Now, he is on the record, and I was in America with the Prime Minister for this extraordinary visit. One of the things he said in that, I think we can describe it as a historic press conference. One of the things he said was that he wants closer relations with Putin, better relations with Putin. Would you agree that that is the right way to go?
Well, good relations between countries are a good idea, but they also have to be serious and honest relationships. And so, just as much as I would say to Trump, you're wrong about Mexico, you're wrong about Muslims, you're wrong about refugees, I would say, yes, I want a relationship with Russia. I would also challenge Putin on the treatment of gays and lesbians within Russia, as well as other aspects of human rights. So you have to have that relationship, and you have to be able to give them that message. That surely is what it's about.
Because in just the same way as some people think that he is equivocal in support for NATO, people think you are equivocal, that you don't stand behind the principle that an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all.
NATO is an alliance of North Atlantic nations, obviously. It's expanded quite a lot towards the east. Russian militarism has grown quite a lot. My point has always been there has to be an improved and deepened dialogue between NATO and Russia in order to demilitarize those borders, in order to reduce tensions in the area. Both sides shipping troops into the border isn't going to bring about that long-term peace.
So can I just check, because this is obviously of material importance, are you saying that the recent deployment of British troops to the Baltics was a mistake?
I'm saying that has happened. I don't think it should be increased. I think we should be looking to try and reduce tensions within the border area. I think that surely is important, because surely we need to have dialogue in a meaningful way, reopen the dialogue with Russia as quickly as we can. But it will also help, of course, in bringing about a better dialogue in the dreadful situation in Syria and bring about a real ceasefire.
Well, now, there wasn't a leadership challenge during the ads, and Jeremy Corbyn is still with me. But first, Allegra, what has Jeremy stirred up?
Indeed. In fact, during the ads, peace broke out in the Labour Party, because I saw Chuck Ramuna give him a high five, say hi to Jeremy Corbyn, and they were very cordial to each other, and also on Twitter out there.
We're a family.
To everybody.
We're a family.
Dan Hodges, who is normally not your biggest fan, says stop all the clocks. Jeremy Corbyn says Trump shouldn't come on state visit until Muslim ban is lifted. And he's right. There you go, from Dan.
Can you keep that one on the screen? Leave it there.
Now, listen, our guest this morning, Jeremy Corbyn, has insisted his MPs must vote this week in favour of triggering Article 50. So much so, it is a 3-line whip, which has caused 2 MPs to resign from his shadow front bench. Now, this hasn't always been the case, and is most definitely a different Jeremy, because in the past he's allowed a free vote on intervention in Syria, perhaps an issue of conscience, but then also on the renewal of Trident, technically a free vote, and there's been suggestions that when the Heathrow expansion comes, that will be a free vote too. So why take a disciplinarian stand this week, an issue which has divided the country? Well, there's been a relaunch. Why the need? This is a bit awkward. This is a word cloud of all of the... Is that a word cloud? No, it isn't. It's a nuclear submarine. This is a word cloud of all of the words that Labour voters, former Labour voters, mention when they describe the party's problems. It was presented to Labour MPs this week. Jeremy Corbyn, what stands out most for you from this word cloud? What's the word?
Apparently Jeremy Corbyn's name is quite large in the word cloud.
It's odd graphics, but leadership and Corbyn seem to be going together there. So,
Does it hurt?
yeah, there's some unkind comments in there. Couldn't you find any nice ones?
This is the one that your lot found.
I know.
This is your internal stuff.
No, but couldn't you find any nice ones? Oh, it's a leak.
Allegra tries because she's a very nice person. Come on, let's get back to the interview. Come on, anyway, very nice to still have you with me. I mean, Allegra makes an important point, which is you are somebody who set yourself up as particularly listening to members. Now, I would suspect that most Labour members would not wish Article 50 to be triggered. So why are you forcing your MPs to vote in the second reading for Article 50 to be triggered to give the Prime Minister the authority she craves?
There was a referendum across the whole of the UK. That referendum produced a result, a majority to leave. Therefore, Parliament, I think, has to respect that. Parliament voted to hold a referendum.
So it's that referendum, which means on this one issue, the views of your members are less important.
Obviously, I'm very well aware of the views of members. The vast majority of members of the Labour Party and affiliated supporters voted to remain.
They did.
Of Labour voters, probably, according to YouGov polls, around 65% voted to remain. But it is a division across the country. In constituencies like mine, there was a massive majority to remain. In equally strong Labour constituencies, mainly in the northwest and northeast, there was an equally strong vote to leave. I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we said, well, actually, we know better than the result of the referendum. So instead, I've made it quite clear that we would respect the result of the referendum, but we're not going to allow this government to turn Britain into a tax haven on the shores of Europe, and so we're going to put forward all those economic arguments.
So can I just check, though, for what it means? I mean, you've had a couple of frontbenchers resign. Did they have to resign, in your view, or was that just their choice?
It was their choice at this stage.
So if your frontbench, if some of your frontbench vote against Article 50 being triggered in the coming week, will they have to resign?
Well, as of now, nobody's voted on anything, and there was no need for anyone to resign at this stage. I've had very cordial conversations with those that have decided to
Will you punish people who vote against you?
Listen, it's obviously impossible to carry on being in the shadow cabinet if you actually vote against a decision made after a very frank and very long discussion of the shadow cabinet earlier this week. However, we're a party where there are massive talents and people are going to be working together on all these issues. And I expect and assume, and I think everyone would agree, that every Labour MP is going to vote for the amendments that Keir Starmer and I have put before the House this week on the issues of the economy, on the issues of protecting workers' rights and extending those rights, and, of course, this reaching out to people all over the world.
And here is the crucial point. You are seeking to amend the bill that has been laid. If you don't get your amendments, will you stick to your view that Labour MPs have to vote to give the Prime Minister that authority? Or do you reserve the right to vote against the bill at the final reading?
What I've said is that we would vote to implement Article 50. We wouldn't block it. I've made that very clear. We've also,
so there is no possibility of you voting against this bill in any circumstances?
What we've already forced the Prime Minister to do is produce a white paper she didn't want to do. We've already forced her to concede there's going to be a vote in Parliament. She wanted to be Henry VIII again, do you know that? And do it with, all without a parliamentary vote. We've already won that argument. We think we can win a number of quite crucial amendments on this.
But what if you don't win those amendments?
Well, you're talking about the 2019 vote, or are you talking
No, I'm talking about this bill.
Look,
are there any circumstances in which Labour would vote against this bill?
We have made it clear Article 50 has to be implemented and there has to be that negotiation. But it's a negotiation that Parliament must be involved in with the bi-monthly reports and votable reports on what ministers are doing. So when Theresa May said she wasn't going to share the negotiation with anybody, she's had to concede on that as well. So she's been
But I think that is a
categorical...
I think, just to be clear, and I would quite like a yes or no if possible, I think that is a categoric commitment that there are no circumstances in which Labour will vote against this bill.
We respect the result of the referendum. We will make sure that in the negotiations over Article 50, which is going to happen, we are going to be part of those negotiations because we do not want this country to be isolated.
Jeremy Corbyn, many, many thanks.